Welcome back to the Eagles High School Football Podcast, or High School Sports Podcast, excuse me. We just talk a lot about football these days. Thanks to the Bryan High School Band for that intro. It's something we're going to try to be starting here, using more audio to use for our intro from local bands. So if you're in a local band in our coverage area and you hear this, prod your band directors to send me some stuff. For that drum line, full band, whatever. We'll try to make it work. But thank you to Bryan for that intro. Before we get into the nitty gritty of football here, for week 2 and then into week 3, we do have a little bit of news to talk about. Consol Jr., I believe, Jerkavian Minor, his appeal for eligibility at Consol was denied today. He transferred from Rudder in the middle of last school year. So he will be eligible to compete in athletics. Lee Fedora said he thinks it's December 12th, but it's right around that time when he enrolled last year at Consol. So that's kind of the big thing that happened today, which is Wednesday. So if you're hearing that Thursday, it's a day old. But another big thing this week, practices are opening for 5A and 6A and TAP schools. So that's every school here in Bryan College Station pretty much. Bryan, Consol, College Station, Rudder, Allen Academy, St. Joseph, and Brazos Christian. There we go. I can't it blanked for some reason there, but all of our schools are now practicing. I know everybody opened up on Monday except St. Joseph and Brazos Christian. They started Tuesday, and everybody else was a go on Labor Day. And just getting out and talking to the coaches on Monday, you could just tell everybody was ready to go. Everybody was ready to be in helmets and start getting used to it and ramp up to the season. So that's kind of the storyline here is, everybody's just ready to get going again. And I know, Abigail, you did stuff on volleyball, which is starting practice this week too. What did you find?
Yeah, they started on Monday too. Unlike football, who couldn't do pads or helmets until this week, volleyball's been pretty much able to practice this entire summer with the skill-specific workouts. They've been doing 2 hours a day since August 3rd. So, talking to the coaches, they're excited to have another team on the other side of the net that's not themselves. Playing against each other all summer, I think, is kind of waning down now. But they said that they're pretty much prepared as they can be, working out this summer and obviously this fall. Coaches said that they've had maybe even more time to get prepared for this season. So it should be good. I think, like you said, Jeff, football's ready, volleyball's so ready to get started. And they start scrimmages actually on Friday. So it'll be getting started pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it, was you got scrimmages coming up this weekend, and It's just started, and then games start Monday, real matches. So volleyball is getting into it quick. Football, not quite as quick because you need more time to get ramped up. But even by their standards, that was kind of what the coaches were telling me too, is it's go time, because we've got scrimmages next week. I know College Station's playing Temple, Consol's playing I think Colleen Ellison, Rudder and Bryan are scrimmaging, and that's all happening Thursday, Friday time frame of next week. And then the following week is the start of the season for them. So, normally they have a full month of practice before the games start counting. But, I think Izar said it's 20 days. Maybe even crazy. Less than that. I think the 7th to the 24th is when the UIL season starts. So it's gonna come real fast, and we'll just kind of see how teams are adjusting to that. It should be real interesting.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we do have 1A and 4A still going strong, and we'll get to it at the end. But we got some new teams coming in as well to the fray that haven't started yet, or unexpectedly haven't started yet in the case of Iola. And we'll get to that. But last week, a lot of really interesting games. I just remember seeing the scores and going, no, that's not how I saw that going. That's not how I saw that going. I think we all finished kind of in our picks last week. I think we all finished kind of a mediocre 9-6. So at this point, none of us knows what we're doing. So it's just you play it by ear. But Abigail, we'll kind of throw it to you. what in your game that you covered last week, what stood out to you?
Yeah, well, I did not expect the game that I went to. I thought Madison for sure was going to kind of blow Liberty out of the water. Liberty hadn't played in week 1 because they lost that game because of Hurricane Laura. So they were coming in. This is their first game of the season. I thought they were going to have trouble getting their defense prepared for Armando Juarez and Madisonville's kind of rushing game, but it ended up being the complete opposite. I mean, Liberty stopped Juarez. They knew he was the main guy for Madisonville, and they really did everything that they could to stop him. He was stopped multiple times at around like the 3-yard line, which could have been 2 big scores for Madisonville. They ended up losing, obviously, 23-10. But that really, I mean, it was really surprising, obviously, after having that week 1 where their offense seemed to be untouchable. They were doing really well. Then to come into this week and kind of see how they could be stopped in the future in district and things like that. So I don't know if that surprised y'all as much as it did me, but that really was something I did not expect in this week.
Yeah, no, that was one of the turn of games for sure. In talking to Urbanski after the game, what did he kind of have to say about how their offense did?
Yeah, he said, obviously those big stops that Liberty had on the, right there in front of the end zone. Obviously, he said that he told the kids that's what dictates whether you win or lose right there, even if you just make one of those. And he said, I asked him if he, if they ever thought of maybe, running somebody else other than Morris, because it seemed like they kept going with him for, to get to inch closer, and it was just not working. He was getting stopped every time. And he said that they kept going with him because he had the freshest legs. He wasn't playing on defense, and his, their other 2 rushers were playing both offense and defense. So he said that, he did have the freshest legs in a sense, and they did keep stopping him. But, Juarez is really tough, and I think they tried to just keep pushing that way.
Again, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of goes moving forward. I think it's still a little bit of a ways till district, so got some time to figure that out. And I think you're facing similar questions if you're Snook, which might be one of the better 0-2 teams in the district or not in the area. And I know Boone Patterson, that's not exactly what he wants to hear at this point, but they played Caldwell, really tough week 1, almost came back and tied that game, lost 28-26, just needed that 2-point conversion. And then last week, Snook really showed what it could do on defense. They held Thorndale out of the end zone, at least their offense, completely all game long. Thorndale ended up winning 6-0. The Bulldogs, of course, the 10th ranked team in 2A Division I as of last week. I haven't looked at the rankings this week yet, but I imagine, I don't know if they would have I don't think they would have fallen from the rankings just because they won 6-0. But yeah, no, they completely kept them out of the end zone offensively. It was a special teams play, a blocked punt recovered in the end zone was the only points of the whole game. So yeah, Snook, I think they've lost 2 games against really highly ranked opponents kind of in their own classification level. I think they're 2A Division II, so technically Thorndale's above them, but pretty similar in size. And then again, played Caldwell, which is, in 3A Division I, so kind of a bit ahead of them in classification, and they played them really tough. So I think Snook is one of those teams that can benefit just by, getting into district and playing teams that it's familiar with, teams that, are at their level, because, we've seen that they can compete with teams above their classification and good teams as well. But one thing, again, I remember last week we were talking, Abigail, you said that Patterson was looking to clean up the penalties. That was the big takeaway that he wanted from week 1, and that did not happen in week 2. I don't know the numbers from week 1, but I would guess it probably got worse because I think it was like 12 penalties for over 100 yards in week 2. A lot of those were kind of after the play, unsportsmanlike conduct, just frustration penalties. Where you kind of you can't let it get the best of you, because if you do, then that's going to hurt your team, and we kind of saw that And that's what Patterson said was, I don't really mind the holding penalties so much. Like, yeah, we don't want those either, but I don't mind it when they're giving effort and then that kind of happens. That's much better than, when we let things get to us and we lose our cool and then we're, instead of a 3rd and 5, we're now in a 3rd and 25 or 3rd and 20. So I think that was what hurt Snook the most, because every time there was lots of good field position for both teams in that game, and both teams did a really good job of keeping them from scoring despite that. But there was a long touchdown run from Snook called back on a holding, and then there was another big long first down play that got called back by a holding, that was then compounded by another penalty that was added on after the play. And so then 3rd and 5, which turns into a 1st and 10 inside Thorndale territory, is now 3rd and 30 something, like way deep in Snook territory. So that was basically the name of the game for the Blue Jays. And if they can get that stuff cleaned up, I saw a very talented defense and an offense that was off its game against another really good defense. So I think Snook is a team that can surprise if they can get some of those things cleaned up, for sure. And Alex, what you were manning the Twitter station, kind of shooting to all the different games and keeping our readers informed that way. What did you observe from the cloud of week 2?
So there were 3 kind of area games that stuck out to me. First, hey, Centerville, we talked about them last week. How are they going to respond after? And the Tigers went out and they were dominant. They beat Corrigan Camden 42-0, and that's a pretty impressive showing to go out and do that against Corrigan Camden. So this week they play Thorndale, who Snook almost beat last week. So can Centerville kind of keep that up? That's kind of the question for them this week. Can they follow up a big win with another one? Rockdale didn't skip a beat. Kobe Mitchell's day, our player of the week. His big performance, I mean, he was almost perfect. He was 17 of 18. He had 1 incompletion, which was an interception, so technically it was still a completion. It was still caught. Threw for 295 yards. Rockdale, dominant win over Taylor. We expected them to beat Taylor, though. And Cameron, they lost a shootout to Belleville. Very exciting game. I actually watched that game on my laptop live stream. Part rule that you can live stream football games on Friday night. I got to watch a little bit from home, and Belleville offense was rolling with Richard Reese. He ran for 344 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's an astronomically high number. So Cameron dropped that to 4A Belleville. Tough loss for them, but yeah, that's just kind of the quick hitters from what I noticed from home last Friday.
Yeah, I think that Cameron game is, if you're Cameron, obviously you're not gonna panic over that. Again, a 4A team and a good 4A team in Belleville at that. We've seen them over the last decade or so in districts with, I think Caldwell was in a district with them for a while. And it's a team that we see because they play some of our other area 4A teams in the past. And like I said, always a really solid 4A program there. So the sky's not falling in Cameron, but it does kind of bring back shades of a couple years ago when the Yeomen kind of had an off season. I think they finished near 500, still made the playoffs, but a down season by Cameron standards. And their big trouble that season was they really struggled to stop the run. So that 344 yards by Richard Reese is not a good sign, and something they're going to be working on in practice, I can guarantee you, this week, stopping the run. But yeah, no, I think those 3 games you hit right on it. Those were some of the ones that were some of the more interesting and some of the more telling ones, especially that Rockdale one. Taylor, obviously not a super team by any means, but Kobe Mitchell came in his first start, took care of business, and kept that going. So it's just another step for him. Now we'll see what he can do. And again, we'll get to this in just a little bit against a really, really good Lexington team as well. Abigail, what did you kind of draw from some of those games that Alex mentioned?
Yeah, like you mentioned, Cameron, they're playing Franklin this week. I'm going to go out and cover that. looking at the stats, if you just looked at their game, I mean, you would have thought that they have won. I mean, they still had great stats. Nothing against them. I know Zane Zeinart, he threw for 183 yards and 3 touchdowns. And they had a really good receiver in Fabian Bynum. Am I pronouncing that wrong?
Fabian, is it Fabian?
Fabian?
I think it's Fabian
Yes.
Bynum.
Yes, yeah. He had 115 rushing, also had 2 touchdowns. So very strong team. I mean, even though they lost, it's not something to be, like you said, Jeff, ashamed of. It was a really good game, and they're going to for sure still have confidence going into Franklin this season. Franklin didn't get to play last week. They had to cancel a game against Hearn. So it'll really be interesting to see, Cameron coming in after having that great game last week, and really seeing, if they could stop Franklin in the 2 quarterbacks they have rushing. 2 weeks ago, they, Wade and Washington rushed for almost 250 yards. So really strong people in the backfield there to see if they can stop them that way. But yeah, I thought that the Cameron game was really nice. Navasota had a big win over Sealy too. We talked about earlier that they're going to have a tough season after that Wharton game. They're going to have a tough slate, and they sure showed that they, at least were able to do it against Sealy. They have Mejia this week. I know we're going to talk about that later, but should be good.
Yeah, for sure. Jesse, the quarterback there. Is there like feedback that I'm hearing?
No, I don't hear.
Okay, I'll try to talk a little bit softer. Kind of a loud mouth over here, but we know that junior Jamar Jesse, the quarterback at Navasota, has kind of started his starting career, so to speak. His reign as the leader of the Navasota offense really well. 2 really solid to great performances to go, and that Sealy score, I'm not going to say it was a blowout, but I feel like the game was a little bit more lopsided than the 33-28 score, because it looked like the updates that Navasota pretty consistently had a 2-score cushion against Sealy pretty much throughout that whole game. And then Sealy scored a late touchdown, or maybe even 2, to kind of close that gap a little bit more. And yeah, like you said, Mejia next week, we saw that they had a really close game in week 1 against Cameron, which Cameron came out and won. So Mejia has a lot of talent as well. And I think this is going to be more of a defensive battle if we're basing it off of what Mejia did with Cameron, because I think that score was 21-16. Yeah. I think at this point we've kind of transitioned into week 3, so we'll kind of just go with it. I have Navasota Mejia, so I think we'll kind of take that right now. We saw what they did against Cameron Mejia, that is the Black Cats. Really defensive game. You don't really see that too much in Texas high school football anymore. As I think the 54-41 is a little bit more characteristic than 21-16. And so I think the interesting thing will be to see if that was more of a kind of week 1 getting used to things, or if we're in for more of a defensive battle. But everything seems to be clicking on all cylinders for the Rattlers right now, and that bodes well. As again, we've talked about how their schedule just gets harder and harder and harder, and they've got a brutal district to get through. So these tough non-district games will be really helpful for them, especially if they keep competing and winning in them.
Yeah, like you said, Jeff, last week Navasota pretty much had the lead the whole time. Cameron ended up having to come back in that Mejia game and kind of have a second half surge a little bit to get that win. And I think if Navasota is able to stay on track, continue to start strong, I think they should be fine against the Mejia team. I think, Cameron obviously they ended up scoring a few times in the second half, but I think Navasota is going to have no problem having that strong first half and to answer back any of Mejia's scoring. So it should be a good game, but I think Navasota is going to, might take this one again this week.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad pick at all. We've seen they've answered the bell at every point, and that offense is just so multiple. They don't rely on just one thing. Jesse can run the ball. He can pass the ball. Randall coming in was the headliner on that. The Darius Randall, the running back, was the headliner coming into the season, and he's had 2 really good games so far this season. Kind of what we expected from him. I think over 100. I think over 100 yards both times. Over 150 the first game for sure. And they've got their receivers are young, or at least a little bit inexperienced. But they looked good in week 1. Put up some stats again in week 2. Xavier Steptoe, I think John Henry, maybe. The names escape me at the moment, but they've got a talented group of wide receivers, I can tell you from watching them. So I think that pretty much tells the tale of the tape for Navasota. I think their defense will continue to get tested as the offenses get better as well. But again, 28 points against Sealy and 13 against Wharton. And really, that was 7 with a last-second Hail Mary at the end of the Week 1 game in the fourth quarter. So I just think they're a team that has been probably, besides probably them and Rockdale, I would say, and Lexington have been the most consistent teams, like from quarter 1 to quarter 4 over weeks 1 and 2, I would say. And so, Abigail, we've kind of talked a little bit about your game so far. You'll be at Cameron Franklin, which should be one of the top games in the entire area this week, along with Lexington and Rockdale.
Yeah, it should be a good one. Fingers crossed. But I know in week 1, I know Alex covered this game, so you might be able to help me out with this a little bit. But they did, Franklin struggled a little bit on offense trying to get those conversions after coming back in the fourth quarter there, and they were unable to do that. But the defense really is going to need to kind of come in this game and own it. I know, talking to Coach Fannin a little bit this week, a big focus for them on the defensive side of things, even with the returners that they have, is having a motor and being able to stick throughout the game, not losing focus, staying with it. And I know after that first week 1 game, loss against Lorena, they really wanted to decrease the penalties and the big plays that Lorena was able to get in there, which forced them to try to come back at the end and unfortunately wasn't able to. So Lee, looking out for the defense to kind of step it up this game against Cameron, but also talking to Coach Fannin, he really is putting a lot of focus on the special teams. I know, Alex, you were there, so you might be able to speak to this more, but they didn't get the onside kick that they tried to get at the end. Lorraine ended up getting possession of that. So he said that they really want to focus on special teams and kind of teaching the guys that it's more than just offense or defense winning games. It could be the special teams who come in at the end and really seal the deal.
Yeah, and one thing that hurt Franklin in that game in the opener was they missed the PAT on the first touchdown that they scored on their opening drive. And that kind of put them behind when Lorena made its comeback. And then at the end, they felt like they needed to go confident to kick that extra point, or maybe they were just going for the win.
Yeah.
But, if they can kind of figure that they've had time to figure out what to do at kicker and get things cleaned up, if it's close and they need to get an onside kick, they've had a chance to sit down and walk through like what to do in that situation to make sure that you can execute it when you need to. Those are very rare instances that you kick, and more often than not, you need to get it than you don't. So we'll see how Franklin responds. They got that week off last week because their game against Hearn got canceled. So this is an intriguing matchup. I'm curious to see how this game turns out on Friday.
Yeah, they came back on Tuesday from after being, having a few days off, not playing against Hearn. So they have only, 3 games of prep kind of going into this game. They are at home. So it'll sure be interesting to see how these two teams come together on Friday.
Right. We have talked a little bit about Cameron so far, but again, I think the thing to be watching is how that run defense bounces back from the Belleville game, where Belleville kind of had their way running the football, and now you don't really get a break because that's what Franklin does, is they run the football. Like, I think they may pass the ball like 3 times a game maybe, and it's always to get you, it's always to catch you off guard. It's never really part of their plan as far as, you know, this is something that we're regularly going to do. We're going to try and surprise you with it, so that, you know, the one time we pass, it's an 80-yard touchdown. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of keeping your eyes on your gaps, manning your gaps, making sure that you don't overrun plays, because again, that's the thing about Franklin's offense is they don't just run, they have like 5 fakes on every play. Even after the ball's been handed off, the quarterback is still faking things and running around. So like it's you covering them. I don't know how you saw it in week 1, Alex, but the 1 or 2 times in my time here that I've covered Franklin, it's a real hunt for the football when you're following the play.
Yeah, binoculars are a must if you're trying to keep stats. You know, they'll get their 2 backs and they'll have a third right behind the quarterback, and misdirection, fake handoff. I mean, quarterback fakes it, rolls right, following the lead blocker. I mean, you got to pay attention. You have to be very disciplined defensively when you're playing Franklin, because one false move and they're busting up 10 or 15 or maybe more.
And so we'll keep it with you, Alex. You're going to be at Bremont and Milano, another intra-Brazos Valley, matchup. And another bit of a head turner with Milano after a big week 1 win. I think they beat Valley Mills by quite a bit in week 1. They kind of get the tables turned on them. I think they got shut out by Marlin 21-0. And now they get Bremont, who seems to be playing a little angry after that week 1 upset loss to Normandy.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all kind of surprised by Normandy's big win. I think we thought Bremont was going to win that one. Milano, they had a hard time last week against Marlin. Didn't really get anything going on offense. They were shut out. Josh Millar, he's kind of the lone bright spot at running back. He's rushed for over 300 yards this year, 100 yards in each game, but that's it. You know, get something going, and it doesn't get any easier this week. They're playing on the road against Bremont. It's homecoming. Normally the homecoming game is one that you expect to win. So Bremont expects to win this game. You know, Jeff Kozowski, Bremont's coach, and Milano's coach, Chad Lagrone, they're old good friends. They're right down the road from each other. So we'll see how it fares for Milano, but Bremont looked pretty stout last week, picking up against Axtell. They won by 38 points. It was the Bremont of old that we expected to see. So I expect the Tigers to probably continue in that same pattern this week.
And we'll see what happens with that. I think now that kind of brings us to, you know, depending on who you ask, either Cameron and Franklin would be the game of the week, or this one, Lexington and Rockdale. It's gonna be a battle. I mean, that's all there is to it, in my opinion. I think there's three Division I Power 5 recruits on the field, possibly more. You know, if you consider some of the young guys that young talented guys that those 2 teams have as well, that might eventually get some of those types of offers. But right now you've got Cameron Valdez, running back for Rockdale, Keyshawn Raven, Rockdale wide receiver, and Jared Kerr, kind of the do everything guy for Lexington. Plays some DB, plays some running back, catches passes out of the backfield. I think last year, I don't know if he's done it this year, but last year he took some snaps in the Wildcat at quarterback. So all guys with SEC offers, all guys with obviously Power 5 offers as well, because SEC. But a lot of talent on that field, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised, even with the quality defenses that those 2 teams put on the field, I wouldn't be surprised at another 54-41, or maybe a little closer, like, you know, 49, 48, 45, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's for sure going to be high scoring. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. 2 big powerhouses on both sides. Kobe Mitchell, like we mentioned earlier, is doing a great job coming in for Robinson this year. I'd be surprised if he didn't have a game similar to what he did last week. 5 touchdowns, 260 yards. Good guy. Him and Dansby seem to be kind of working well together. I know Dansby had quite a few touchdowns outside. I don't remember how many, but he was a good target for Mitchell, it seemed last week. But then you have Kerr on the other side of the ball. So, like you said, Jeff, it'll be a powerful game. I'd be surprised if it wasn't very high up there, like the Belleville and Cameron game was last week.
Yeah, this is definitely an exciting matchup. Definitely curious how Jared Kerr's able to fare against Rockdale's defense. He's definitely going to be the focal point of their attack, trying to stop him. He has run wild on everybody that he's played this year so far. So
and last year.
And last year.
In 7 games, I think he had 1,400 yards or something crazy like that.
Yeah, this guy is the real deal, and this is going to be their biggest test yet, though. And what Jared Kerr is able to do against that Rockdale defense.
And luckily for Kerr, he's not alone out there. Lexington has a history of having some pretty dang good offensive lines, and this year they got another good one. And it starts up front at center with Juan Lara, who's been that guy for him for several years now, and is kind of the leader of that line. Kind of deals with a lot of the communication on that line as well. And I know that he's kind of a focal point for what they do offensively. Maybe not where the football goes, obviously, but I think it kind of starts with him and that line. And they also have Sheldon Springer at quarterback, who's maybe not the biggest name of the quarterbacks in this area, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was by the end of the season. He's been a starter there since he was a freshman. I think he's a junior now. I think the only time I've actually seen him in person was at 7-on-7. So obviously that's not in an 11-on-11 with pads set up, but he looked good at 7-on-7, has a strong arm. I know they're excited about him at quarterback, and he knows the offense. So it's not just Kerr. He's obviously the headliner, but there's talent all over the field on both of those teams. And I mean, that's why it's 2 teams that are ranked in the top 10 of their respective classifications. I think Lexington is 7 in 3A Division II, and Rockdale 6 in 3A Division I believe. So these are teams that have state title aspirations. Probably you would consider them more dark horses for the state title because 6 and 7. But obviously they have the talent to get there. They have the talent to be there. And we saw the last 2 state titleists from this area didn't come in as the favorites. They worked their way up through the season. That being 2017 Rockdale, 2017 College Station. They came in and they beat the power teams. And so, this is a chance for both of these teams to play another team at that level early in the season. So I think that's what you're looking at this weekend is how those 2 teams deal with playing teams of their caliber before they get to districts. And so that pretty much wraps up what we got. What other area matchups are exciting you guys before we go?
Iola is playing for the first time this season after canceling their first 2 games because of COVID. So they're coming out. I talked to Coach Bamberg today. They're excited to start. I think it's been a long 2 weeks for them in quarantine, and they're so ready to get the game started. I think it might be like Liberty was with Madisonville. They're very fresh. It could go either way. But Lovelady projected to win by more than 20. But Lovelady hasn't won this season. So that's a game that I'll be looking out for too. Kind of see how Iola comes out in their first game of the season.
And in that same vein, I think Dimebox is kind of in that same boat as well because they're starting their season this week against Prairie Lee. Kind of always scheduled that way. They did start practice a couple weeks after most of the other 1A to 4A teams in the state. So getting a little extra 6-man action in addition to Calvert already playing. So that's always good. But I think Dimebox is interesting because they kind of burst onto the scene last year. First year as a program. not competing for, to make the playoffs or for any championships. They kind of played an outlaw schedule last year and had a lot of success. I think they went 4-1, and they're missing Ray Gilbert, who graduated, so they don't have him back, but they do have almost everybody else back. A lot of experience at quarterback, running back, and in the secondary on defense as well. So they're looking to build, and I think they kind of have the perfect setup for that, because they basically took Calvert's place in Calvert's old district, which Calvert completely dominated. 3 teams that were not nearly as good as Calvert, and I think Dimeboks will kind of take Calvert's role in that district. Maybe not being as good as Calvert, but I would not be surprised if they ran the table in that district. So it'll be really interesting to see how they get this season started against Prairie League. And I think that's going to do it for us here on the Eagles High School Sports Podcast. We'll be with you next week to talk about all the stuff we got wrong about week 3, and then hazard some more guesses about week 4, as well as other 5A, 6A news. I bet we'll be looking, forward to that week's scrimmages and what those teams want to get out of those before the season starts for them the next week. So lots to talk about next week, and we'll see you then for more football here on the podcast. Thanks.